Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you some tips to prepare for Dawntrail's early access and how to make the most of the game as soon as you log in on June 28th. Every expansion, people ask me, Haps, you doing anything special to prepare for the expansion? Is there anything I should know? And I always have a little checklist of things that I like to do. So I'm just going to share that with you, as well as some general tips that may help some of you who are going into this as your first brand new expansion experience. Now, some of the tasks that I do are kind of either specific to me or things that are generic. They're not things that really have a time limit or a time frame. You just kind of want them done ahead of time for a handful of specific reasons. For example, I didn't really level my crafters all this expansion other than one right at the release of Endwalker in order to make sure I could meld my own gear. And that is a piece of advice that I have for you going into Dawntrail. Get one crafter to 100 so you can meld your own gear as soon as possible. But ahead of the time, I just need to make sure all of my crafters are level 90. This allows me to repair all of my own gear for the entirety of the Dawntrail expansion, and, that's just kind of a handy thing to be able to do, especially when one or more of your teammates learns that and requests the repair 2 or 3 times every single time you're raiding. Speaking of crafters or gatherers, on top of that, you could, of course, prepare crystals and shards. If that's not something you've thought about in a while, it's definitely worth keeping in your mind if you plan on trying to get into crafting and gathering, especially during the early days when things are more expensive in order to make a little bit of gil. Another thing that's kind of crafting and gathering tangential is materia. A lot of people don't know about a very simple early game feature that's unlocked in Final Fantasy XIV called materia transmutation. Basically, over at the materia station in Blackbrush in Central Thanalan, you can trade in 5 materia and get 1 back. And there's a few stipulations for it that I've covered over the years in various videos, but basically, the 5 materia you put in, you can't get any of those same ones back. So putting in 5 different combat materia, for example, would heavily increase your odds of getting something like, say, a crafting or gathering materia back, which a lot of people do use early on in order to make a lot of gil. But on top of that, there's a small percentage chance that whatever grade materia you put in, you can get a grade higher than that coming out. So you could put in 5 grade 10 materias and potentially get back a grade 11. People will do this early on to make a lot of gil or to get a little bit of a head start in collecting materia that they can then overmeld later. My personal advice, use the hunts in Dawntrail to get your tier 11 and 12 combat materia, and if you have spare materia before the expansion, trade that in, try to get grade 11 crafting or gathering materia, and either use it for yourself or sell it immediately while there's not a lot of it on the market. Make that gil, and then when more starts flooding in, you can spend the gil you made and probably get more back. And then there's usually just prepping a lot of currencies and whatnot. For example, the Fate currency, bicolor gemstones. If they use it again, it would be nice to have at least close to cap, maybe a little bit under, because we're going to need to unlock the NPCs that actually allow us to buy stuff from them, and thus we'll have to do fates along that process. But, it's probably just a good idea to not be sitting at 0. Hunt seals is another thing. Now, everyone's still wondering whether or not we're going to upgrade from sacks of nuts to something else. And again, we don't know. If they keep the same currency, then it can't hurt to already have a bunch of them going in. Don't necessarily need to be capped, but having quite a handful would be a good idea. Not to mention, you can actually trade in Centurio and Allied seals for free teleport tickets, which, when you're teleporting around at the start of an expansion, is a good idea. So I would probably trade in your Allied and Centurio seals at the respective hunt NPCs in order to get some free teleports. I've got a few thousand tucked away myself. And then, of course, there's tomes. Now, comedy and causality are both going to basically be removed from circulation. You'll be able to exchange them at the start of the expansion for poetics, and poetics will be used universally for everything level 90 and under. The big thing here is that as soon as early access releases, you should be able to exchange poetics for item level 660 gear, which you can then use to level in Dawntrail from about 90 to 95-ish. Some people get greedy and take it all the way, and that can get really tough, especially if you're a tank, so I don't recommend doing that. But I do at the very least recommend having it for those first few levels just to make things a little bit easier. Not to mention that you can also prepare gear for Viper and Picto, whether it's waiting to buy level 90 caster and scouting gear or going back and buying level 80 gear to get them off on the right foot. They don't need all of that, but it definitely comes in handy. On top of that, you may want to consider preparing dungeon gear for Picto and Viper. Specifically, I would really only do, I guess, the level 87 stuff, because your tome gear is kind of still almost as good, if not a little better at 85. There's a 3 item level gap, but it's not really worth getting hung up on that, where the dungeon gear gets better at 85. And at 89, you're so close to 90 that it's like, do you really want to prep it? So maybe just having level 87 gear, you really don't need to do that, but it is something that can be a little bit handy. Unless, of course, you're leveling in Bosia or Zadnor, in which case, ignore that completely. And if you're someone who happens to have progressed squadrons and have access to the level 40 command missions, don't forget that you can get grade 3 FC buff equivalent items that you can use on yourself for 2 hours from those command missions once a week. It's handy if you happen to be in an FC that can't or doesn't make grade 3 wheels and thus doesn't have access to like the 15% EXP buff or gathering buffs, or maybe if you just want buffs that are different than what your FC is going to be enabling when the expansion actually goes into early access. Now, those things you can do anytime before an expansion comes out. If you just copy paste that checklist, it pretty much works every single expansion. You just change the names around. The next things are time frame specific. And while you can also replicate these expansion on expansion, I have to make note of them for people who have never done one before. So this stuff you're going to want to pay extra special attention to. So first, the week of June 18th. This is 10 days before early access begins, the weekly reset before early access begins. The most important thing you can do on this week is prepare a finished book of Wondrous Tales. Now, this is unlocked over in Idleshire, and by completing the tasks on the book, 9 of them in order to complete it, there's a bunch of rewards, but no matter what, it's worth 50% of a level when you turn it in. Now, you can actually hold on to a book for 2 weeks. So if you accept a book on June 18th, you can then wait until June 28th to turn it in. You just have to make sure you turn it in before July 2nd, at which point the book will be destroyed. It will have reached its time limit. So this 50% of a level has a couple of uses. Probably the most important is that you can instantly get 50% of a level on Viper or Pictomancer. And especially if you're dungeon grinding, you're going to want to get to level 81 as quick as possible so you can actually do dungeons. You do have another option though. You can hold on to that book as you do the main scenario quests. And if you're not a big side quester and you're worried about potentially hitting a level lock, then you can save it for if you get level locked out of MSQ, and then bam, throw it at your character and you'll be all set. Now, the reason we do this the week of June 18th and not the week of June 25th is because if you do it the week of June 18th, you can then accept another book the following week. Now, you will have to wait until you actually turn in the first book before you can accept the second one. But throughout the early access weekend, you always have the option to go back and grab another book for either of the reasons I mentioned. Maybe you want to do 50% of a level on Viper and 50% of a level on Pictomancer. Maybe you want one for the potential MSQ lock or one for the new jobs. Maybe you just want to use both on one job, in which case I would recommend using it on, let's say, 80 to 81, and then holding on to it until a potential level lock, or even just getting that last little bit from 89 to 90. Either way, you have a ton of use cases for it. You just got to make sure to use the first book by July 2nd and the second book by July 9th, and you're all set. That's the only thing I would realistically prepare the week before, but the week of June 25th. Now keep in mind, 48 hours of this week between June 25th and June 28th, the game is down for maintenance. So you really only have about a day, a little bit more, to prepare for this. So week of June 25th, like I said, you have the Wondrous Tales, but you'll do that during early access itself. The number one thing you want to do on this week is prepare your challenge log. Now, the reason what you're doing here is you're getting a bunch of different objectives to within 1 of completion. That way, you can quickly finish any of them in order to get some instant experience points. I recommend at least doing the total dungeons one, which is 5, and the roulette dungeon ones, which is 3. So you do 2 non-roulette dungeons, 2 roulette dungeons, and then don't touch roulettes until early access. You'll do 1 roulette dungeon, and as long as you don't get Ifrit, Garuda, or Titan, you'll complete both of them simultaneously, as well as get the EXP from the roulette, and that is worth a ton of experience. I combine that with the Wondrous Tales to basically get through all of 80 to 81 on a single new job. Now, if you're feeling really ambitious, you can do some of the other objectives. You know, you can look at the crafting and gathering ones. You can do the leave quest ones, the fate, one of the two fate ones, since, you know, they are both kind of stacking on top of each other. And you could even go into like guild hests and give out a few player comms, give out 4 out of 5 player comms, and then, you know, move on from there and then quickly go into a guild hest on expansion launch and give out the 5th one. You can do that if you want to go that extra mile, but the total dungeon and roulette dungeon are the two that I absolutely recommend doing. And then if you're someone who likes variety, you do have a couple of other options for getting some EXP options prepared for Viper, Picto, or whatever. One of the big ones is grabbing a set of daily hunts before maintenance begins. This allows you to do those daily hunts, then go get another set the morning of early access, and then get another set after daily reset that same day. I'm not going to do this. I don't really recommend it unless you're someone who really likes spreading out your leveling methods, but it's an option and people like options, so I'm presenting it to you here. Now, you might be wondering if you could do something like prepare Endwalker side quests by doing them before the expansion comes out and then turning them in on Viper and Pictomancer. And I actually thought before recording this video that you couldn't do that, but it turns out you can. You can just do generic Endwalker side quests as a level 90 class, then swap to a level 80 class and turn them in. It'll just adjust the EXP that you would actually get. So if you want to go that route, you can, but I think that's a lot more work than you need to do given the other things that I've laid out for you already. So I'm going to leave that one in your hand. I also wouldn't save up a bunch of nearly completed side quests to turn in on a level 90 job either. I actually thought the EXP got reduced for generic side quests, but it actually doesn't. It's just not really a relevant value when you can go just do the MSQ and new side quests, which also have quest syncing. So realistically, I just don't recommend that method, but I had a lot of people come to me with it and I was like, I wouldn't do it. However, something you can't do is accept Arcasadara, or any other tribe quest for that matter, as one job and complete them on another. So you can't accept Arcasadara quests on, let's say, a level 90 summoner and then hand them in on level 80 Pictomancer. That won't work, so I'll at least stop you from doing that. And finally, on the morning of June 28th, early access itself, if you're up when the servers are up and if login goes okay, which is very much something we have to keep our eye on, then you do have a few options before daily reset. I already mentioned that if you really want to do that triple set of daily hunts, that is an option. But also, you can grab the Arcasadara quests the morning of on Viper and Picto before daily reset and then do another set after. Especially if you're not planning to speed level these jobs and you think you won't be max level by the time that daily reset rolls around, then that's a perfectly viable thing to do. You can also do your roulettes that morning and then do your roulettes later on in the day, which again can really help with that 80 to 81 range, especially if you plan on leveling both Viper and Pictomancer. Even if you aren't doing Viper and Pictomancer, doing your roulettes before daily reset can also be a tool to help you stay ahead of any potential level locks from the MSQ if you're someone who likes to skip a lot of side content. So definitely bear all of those things in mind. And one last bit of advice to anyone who pre-ordered and got Azima's earrings, a lot of people don't know that these pre-order earrings actually work for one level later than they say. While the actual website says that the earring works up to level 90, the earring itself, like all of the pre-order earrings before it, reads that it works at level 90 and below. That does, however, mean that it works at level 90 up to level 91. Now, of course, it only works on monster kills, but you can wear it for that one level. So just wanted to let you know that it worked that way. Now, I'm sure there are other things you could do, especially in the crafting and gathering category that people could probably lean you more towards, but this is largely focused on getting the most out of these specific time-related goals, because not everyone thinks to do these things, and a lot of people don't even know things like Wondrous Tales, Transmutation, all that even exist in the first place. So I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into that. That's going to be a wrap for my Dawntrail prep video. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned. You know me, I'll be doing tons of content throughout Dawntrail's early access release months after, and let's be honest, the whole expansion. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one, and until then, take care.